welcome to Some TV Movie Channel, your home for amazing movies and non-stop entertainment. Get ready to enjoy blockbuster hits, timeless classics, and exciting stories from every genre. Whether you love action, drama, comedy, or adventure, there's always something to watch here. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest uploads. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the movie experience with Some TV Movie Channel. In this video, we will take an in-depth look at the movie Man of Steel. We will explore its storyline, provide a detailed plot summary, and discuss the film's cast and characters. Additionally, we will cover the movie's production details, box office performance, critical reception, and overall impact. Finally, we will share reviews and personal reactions to the film. So, let's get started. When Man of Steel was released, its opening weekend performance became a topic of discussion because the movie was heavily front-loaded. The main question was whether an additional $10 million earned through Thursday Walmart screenings should be included as part of the official opening weekend total or counted separately as Thursday preview earnings. Because of this, the numbers can become a little complicated. Man of Steel debuted with a reported $128.7 million total over its first 3.25 days. If we include the Walmart Thursday earnings as part of the opening weekend, the film achieved one of the biggest non-sequel debuts in history. It surpassed the $116.1 million opening of Alice in Wonderland and ranked just behind The Hunger Games, which earned $152 million during its debut weekend. This placed Man of Steel among the top 12 biggest openings at the time, ahead of Iron Man 2, which opened with $128.1 million. However, if we only count the traditional Friday to Sunday weekend total of $116.1 million, which is the method generally used for box office comparisons, the results change. Under that measurement, Man of Steel still broke the June opening weekend record by surpassing Toy Story 3, which earned $110 million, and matched Alice in Wonderland's $116.1 million debut. However, it fell short of Shrek the Third, which held the record with a $121 million opening weekend. The difference between these calculations created some confusion, but for long-term box office comparisons, the standard Friday to Sunday figures are usually considered the most reliable measurement. Using the full $128 million tribute, this performance is truly impressive, although not entirely unexpected for the reasons I will explain below. The single-day grosses for Man of Steel were $12 million on Thursday, $44 million on Friday, $36.3 million on Saturday, and $36.6 million on Sunday. The film received an A Cinema score from audiences. Its opening audience was 56% male, with 62% of viewers being over the age of 30. Around 59% of the audience watched the film in 2D, while 12% chose IMAX, which contributed approximately $13.3 million in IMAX earnings alone, a new June IMAX opening record. The good news is that this opening is more than double the biggest DC Comics debut outside of The Dark Knight, $158 million, and The Dark Knight Rises, $160 million. Following them on the list were Watchmen with $55 million, Green Lantern with $53 million, and the first four Batman films, Batman Robin, $43 million, Batman Forever, $52 million, Batman Returns, $47 million, and Batman, $42 million. The first three Batman movies also set opening weekend records during their respective eras. Batman Forever, which debuted exactly 18 years earlier, became the first film to achieve a $20 million single-day opening. In comparison, Man of Steel earned $21 million from Thursday midnight screenings alone. Looking back at the original Superman film from 1978, the movie broke the weekend box office record in December of that year and became only the second film ever to earn more than $12 million in a single weekend during its third weekend of nationwide release. Its opening debut was $7 million, while Star Wars later achieved massive growth after expanding from 1,045 to 1,705 theaters in July 1978. Another positive sign is that Man of Steel earned $51 million internationally, with several major markets scheduled to open the following weekend. The film was expected to recover its $225 million production budget by the end of the next weekend or early the following week, with strong overseas earnings helping its long-term performance. However, the film faced the possibility of a significant second weekend drop due to competition from Monsters University and other major releases. Warner Brothers had already launched a strong marketing campaign, producing emotionally powerful trailers that successfully highlighted the film's major action moments and dramatic themes. Although some viewers felt that the trailers revealed too many emotional scenes, the final promotional videos, including the You Are Not Alone and Nokia trailers, were edited quickly enough to create excitement without fully revealing the story. Watching the Nokia trailer only after seeing the film also made the experience more enjoyable. Warner Brothers also managed expectations effectively by predicting an opening weekend of around $75 million, while rival studios were only estimating a possible debut near $100 million. Because of this, the actual $128 million opening was considered a major overperformance and was reported as a result far beyond expectations. However, there is an important comparison to consider. The 5-day opening of Superman Returns in 2006, which earned $83 million, would be approximately $103 million today after adjusting for inflation, or around $118 million when considering modern 3D and IMAX ticket pricing. By comparison, the heavily promoted Man of Steel sold around 14.2 million tickets, only slightly more than the approximately 12.9 million tickets sold by Superman Returns during its Friday to Sunday opening period. This means that while Man of Steel appears to have achieved a massive improvement, part of that growth comes from nearly a decade of inflation and higher-priced premium formats. Still, this should not diminish the film's achievement. A $128 million opening is an extraordinary success for almost any movie outside of major event films like The Avengers. The performance also reinforces that Superman Returns, which earned $200 million domestically and $395 million worldwide, was not necessarily a failure. Instead, it was a heavily over-budgeted blockbuster that failed to generate the record-breaking numbers needed to justify its enormous $270 million production cost. The opening performance of Man of Steel was also very similar to the 2007 release of Pirates of the Caribbean. At World's End, that film opened with $13 million from Thursday night previews, reached $127 million by Sunday, and earned $114 million during the traditional Friday to Sunday opening weekend. However, that movie benefited from the Memorial Day holiday, which added an extra $25 million on Monday. Something Man of Steel was not expected to do was come close to the performance of films like Toy Story 3, which earned around $415 million domestically. At the same time, other major franchise films provide useful comparisons. Pirates of the Caribbean ended its domestic run with $309 million, while Iron Man 2 opened with $128 million and finished with $312 million. Based on those numbers, around $300 million domestic seemed like a realistic closing point for Man of Steel. The worst-case scenario was that the film would be heavily front-loaded and lose momentum because of strong competition from upcoming releases, including The Heat, White House Down, The Lone Ranger, Monsters University, and Despicable Me 2 over the following weekends. A finish closer to Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows A Part 1, which earned about $295 million domestically, was possible, but reaching $400 million was becoming increasingly unlikely. Man of Steel was not expected to become the next Toy Story 3 or Spider-Man, but a $300 million domestic total remained very achievable. A major collapse was unlikely, especially because the film would continue playing in IMAX theaters for a full month until Pacific Rim arrived on July 12. The movie's large budget was already being partially offset through approximately $170 million worth of promotional partnerships. Even the film's destruction-filled action scenes featured carefully placed company branding, helping create valuable marketing exposure. The international rollout was also expected to be extremely strong, with the film already earning $71.6 million overseas during the opening weekend, bringing its worldwide debut close to $200 million. The biggest question was how audiences would respond compared to critics. Man of Steel did not only need to make money, it needed to rebuild excitement for the Superman franchise and create momentum for future DC projects, including a planned sequel and the eventual Justice League film. For the moment, Man of Steel had successfully proven that Superman could still be a major global box office brand, much like Iron Man did for Marvel 5 years earlier. So far, the results were very promising. Meanwhile, The Purge experienced a significant second weekend drop, falling 76%. Although this kind of decline is common for horror movies, the film still performed well considering its low budget, earning a strong return after opening with $82 million worldwide. Before Midnight, the final film in the Before trilogy, expanded into wider release but earned only around $1.5 million from 893 theaters. The limited audience appeal was expected because it was the third entry in a series where many viewers had not seen the first two films, Before Sunrise and Before Sunset, which earned around $5 million each during their original releases. Iron Man 3 dropped about 50% due to competition from Superman but still earned $2.9 million for the weekend, bringing its domestic total just under $400 million at $399.6 million. The Great Gatsby finished its domestic run with $139 million, while The Hangover Part 3 ended with $107 million. Both films, despite having production budgets around $105 million, were on track to surpass $300 million worldwide. Now You See Me became a surprising box office success, earning $10.2 million during its third weekend with only a 46% decline. The film reached approximately $80 million domestically and was becoming a clear contender to cross the $100 million mark. Fast Furious 6 added another $9.2 million, bringing its domestic total to $219 million. It officially surpassed Fast 5's $209 million domestic gross, becoming the biggest domestic success in the franchise at the time. Its worldwide earnings also continued to climb past $630 million. Epic reached around $95 million domestically and was expected to cross $100 million soon, although it was beginning to lose some of its 3D advantage due to competition from World War Z and Monsters University. Star Trek Into Darkness continued its strong international performance, surpassing the global total of the first Star Trek film and crossing $400 million worldwide. After Earth reached approximately $54 million domestically and $145 million worldwide, while The Internship earned around $30 million domestically and was unlikely to reach the $50 million mark. That wraps up this weekend's box office report. Join us next time for another worldwide box office update and review. Man of Steel ended up becoming one of the biggest films of the year, delivering a gravity-defying $186.7 million opening weekend worldwide. Directed by Zack Snyder, produced by Christopher Nolan, and starring Henry Cavill as Superman, the film earned $125.1 million internationally and $79.5 million in the United States during its opening. It achieved the biggest June opening in history at the time, while also performing strongly in major international markets, including the United Kingdom with $17.1 million, South Korea with $9.9 million, and Mexico with $9.8 million. The film expanded into 26 additional countries the following weekend and was expected to benefit from strong international momentum. The success came as a major relief for Warner Brothers, which had struggled to create a consistently successful Superman franchise since Richard Donner's iconic 1978 Superman film. Later attempts, including Superman Returns starring Brandon Routh, failed to fully revive mainstream interest in the character. However, Man of Steel brought together the creative team behind the Dark Knight trilogy, with David S. Goyer writing the screenplay and Christopher Nolan serving as producer. The film appeared positioned to outperform The Dark Knight internationally. If it achieved more than 40% of The Dark Knight's overseas performance, it would surpass $1 billion worldwide and place itself among the year's highest-grossing movies, competing with major Marvel successes such as Iron Man 3. How high will Superman fly at the box office? According to industry sources, Man of Steel was expected to make a massive $100 million debut at the US box office. Early audience reactions were strong, and Warner Brothers was heavily promoting its $225 million blockbuster through an ambitious marketing campaign. As of Thursday, studio executives were reportedly projecting a domestic opening of around $300 million or more in long-term revenue potential, especially if positive word of mouth and strong audience ratings continued to build worldwide interest. Fandango reported that Man of Steel was already outperforming several major summer releases from the same point in the ticket sales cycle. The film began selling tickets on May 21st, and expectations were high. At the time, Iron Man 3 remained the biggest hit of the summer, earning nearly $1.2 billion worldwide and around $387 million domestically. Although DC's Superman reboot still had a long way to go before competing with Marvel's Tony Stark, Many industry analysts believe the film had the potential to become a major success. One rival executive described the movie's performance as very impressive, while audiences had to wait until Monday, June 10th, when the review embargo lifted at 8 p.m. PT, the same night as the film's New York premiere. Directed by Zack Snyder and starring Henry Cavill as Superman, Man of Steel was produced by Christopher Nolan and Charles Roven. The film began its international rollout on June 13th. However, the box office performance of Justice League continued to disappoint, and the superhero team-up film was no longer expected to surpass Man of Steel's global earnings. Warner Bros. Officially launched its DC Extended Universe with Zack Snyder's Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice in 2016, following the events of Man of Steel and expanding the shared universe with films such as Suicide Squad and Patty Jenkins' Wonder Woman. Everything eventually led to Justice League, which brought together some of DC's greatest heroes: Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, Aquaman, Cyborg, and Superman. The team united to face the villainous Steppenwolf and his army of parademons, who returned to Earth after thousands of years to reclaim the lost mother boxes and transform the planet into a new world. Despite the film's ambitious scale, its mixed critical and commercial response prevented it from becoming the major success many had expected. According to Forbes, Justice League was not expected to surpass Man of Steel's worldwide box office total of approximately $668 million, including around $291 million domestically. This made it one of the lowest-grossing entries in the DC Extended Universe at the time. Updated estimates placed Justice League's worldwide earnings at around $657 million. A major part of the discussion surrounding Man of Steel focused on the film's controversial conclusion, particularly Superman's battle with General Zod in Metropolis. While the destruction created an intense and memorable action sequence, it also raised questions about Superman's responsibility toward innocent civilians and the consequences of such a massive conflict. Interestingly, the destruction of Metropolis was not the main point of disagreement between writer David S. Goyer, director Zack Snyder, and producer Christopher Nolan. The biggest debate involved the scene that followed: Superman's decision to kill General Zod. Speaking on Empire Magazine's podcast Through the Playlist, Snyder and Goyer explained that the original script had Zod being sent back into the Phantom Zone. However, Goyer felt that killing Zod would create a more original and emotionally challenging story. He wanted to place Superman in a situation where he had to choose between allowing innocent people to die or making an impossible decision. While the filmmakers believed this created a dramatic dilemma, many fans questioned the reasoning behind Superman taking a life. The character had always been defined by his compassion, restraint, and moral principles. Throughout the movie, Clark Kent's upbringing is shown as being shaped by a loving family and strong values. Because of this, some viewers felt the story needed a clearer explanation for why Superman would suddenly break one of his most important rules. A similar example can be seen in Batman Begins, where Bruce Wayne is given an opportunity to kill someone but refuses because of his personal code. Although others eventually take action, Batman's decision remains a key part of his character. This raised another question: if Superman's resistance to killing is no longer absolute, would future versions of the character continue making similar choices? Christopher Nolan was initially hesitant about having Superman kill Zod, but Goyer eventually convinced him and received approval from DC Comics. Goyer explained that he created the heat vision scene to force Superman into an unavoidable emotional crisis. Nolan accepted the idea because he believed it pushed Superman into a place where he had never been before. However, many longtime fans, including Superman supporters, felt that the decision moved the character away from one of his defining qualities. Writer Mark Waid also expressed disappointment, describing the moment as an experience that felt disconnected from the traditional spirit of Superman. Ultimately, Man of Steel remains a film that sparked major discussions about heroism, responsibility, and the challenges of adapting iconic characters for modern audiences. Superman wins by killing Zod by snapping his neck. And as this momentum was building, as Zod was out of control and Superman was for the first time here since the fishing boat 90 minutes ago, struggling to actually save innocent victims instead of casually catching them in middle. Some crazy guy in front of us was muttering, "Don't do it, don't do it." And then Superman snapped Zod's neck and then guy stood up and said in a very loud voice, That's it. You lost to me. I am out. And his girlfriend had to literally pull him back into his seat and keep him from walking out. And that crazy guy was me. That crazy guy was me. I was barely even remember doing that. I had to be told afterward that I would turn that. That's how caught up in a bitter role I felt, and after the next snapping even through I stuck it out. I did know to give a blame about the rest of the movie. As the credits rolled, I told myself I was upset because Superman dies and not kill. Full stop. Superman does not kill. But sitting here, I broke it down some more in my head because I sense either that was more it Superman clearly regretted killing Zod. I had to guarantee that the filmmakers at least went away out of their way to put Superman's imposition, suggesting that hardly conclusively proving to he had no choice. And did I love Superman's immediate aftermath reaction to what he has done? I granted that they would at least try to present Superman with an impossibly choice and on a purely rational level. And if I had been a movie about a guy named Ultra Guy, I might even have brought what he did. But after I processed all that, I realized that it was so much like uncompromising vision of Superman that made this a total failure moment for me. It was a fair lead up to the moment as Superman's having his final one-on battle with Zod. Show me that he going out of his way to save people from getting caught in the middle. Show me that trying to simultaneously protect human and beat his oldest actingly costing Superman the fight will that a moment of the hard choice. Show me without doubt that Superman has no other but and do a better job of convincing me. That's hard decision to make, and maybe I will give it to you, but even if I do, it's not a victory. Notice that solid darkening I'll usually sense criticized that does not even feel like I win so much as a stop loss 2.5 hours, and I never once got a sense that a Superman's really achieved or earned anything. There is only one way this hands, either you die or I do. It's a lead loaded statement from a mechanical militant Zack from Planet Grape Man of Steel. There's our story of Superman's Henry S like we have never seen before in the film General Zod. Michael off for a dark mirror image of Superman, one who is hell-bent on fulfilling his purpose as a protector of his race at all costs and morality be damned. On the one hand, we have a radicalized extra-terrorist, a struggle terrorist. On the other is our refuge fighting for his home. It's not exactly the way you would expect our Superman story to be framed, but these are filmed out to bring Superman to the real world, not some colorful fantasia from a golden age comic book. When Man of Steel was released in 2013, fans were divided over the latest interpretation of the Big Blue Boy Scout. Some longed for the Donor's days, when Superman's suit was as bright and sunny as his disposition. Other praising and the bold new take on a Superman is seen as the alien that is portraying our world coping with his truth. Man of Steel trusts the Kryptonian hero into the middle of moral dullness so complex as sources would be doing some results. After all, how does one choose between the reservation of their own race and an entire world filled with the lives of another? There are significant themes to explore in Man of Steel and its ultimate conclusion, so let's dive into it, shall we? While Crowe was sent to Earth with our mission to life out his life as he sees it, the age-old cycle of the past reading its ugly head treaders to offend that mission. Krypton's government had descended into a heresy of madness, serving egos and desire for control over listening to the science and putting their own people's needs first. As such, the planet becomes doomed after the Kryptonians mine the planet's core of their own gain, a move that feels so reflexive of mankind's effect on Earth. K's father Jor-El condemns the movie and seeks to preserve the Kryptonian race and legacy. General Zod actually has the same goal, albeit without twist. He ages a cop on Krypton and intend to eliminate the bullet line that led him to this awful state. There is an element of irony that presents itself here, as General Zod is the very product of the destructive society Krypton has become. Jor-El seeks to break the cycle by bearing a son through the first natural birth the planet has seen in centuries. His son therefore has no predetermined destiny, unlike the rest of the artificially bright population who area created to fulfill specific role on Krypton. In essence, Krypton lost its soul hundreds of years prior to its destruction. While Zod resents the leader of Krypton for Colo's disagreed of the planet's stability. His mission of preserving a gone throughout the film by restarting the process of artificial birth would continue be while the society he found abroad. Cal recognizes this when he exert their grip on had its chance. Zod's focus was so singular that he can't see the forest for the trees. Superman's very as well as his action represents the breaking of Krypton's destructive cycle. Man of Steel tackles the idea of humanity reacting to first contact. Despite his humanoid appearance, Lord Kent is an extraterrestrial healing from the deepest to darkest corner of space. His adoptive father Jonathan Kent always understood Clark's nature. He would coach him to keep his capabilities a secret from the world. But Jonathan also know that in a day the time would arrive when Clark could be in the public eye. While Samia has been par attitudes toward Clark power as a relations of his duty to blister the Man of Steel as seen in past inter being presented here. Of course, Jonathan is acting as a concerned parent, but he also understands that our time will come when Clark is a fully grown adult who will have a level-headed perception of the world and able to popularity with the consequences of his address. Jonathan may have felt cold at times, suggesting that Clark perhaps should not have saved a school bus full of his bear. But Quagajubag went sacrificing himself to keep Clark's secret. As far as our moral philosophy is concerned, Jonathan was indeed the bomb of utilization, a neo-hoopiest to the greater good. Jonathan knows that one day Cal will be a hero who will be able to save countless lives that outrated his own life. Additionally, Jonah can understand that the world will be traditions in acceptance of Clark. That's an easier truth to grasp considering the world's a problem with racism. Biogobia. Simply waiting then became the obvious choice. Imagine having your identity stripped away at birth. Carianians faced that a reality for centuries as babies in the form of the Genesis chamber. A predatory mind's purpose was written into the gender code. By design, the government has a total control over its population. Jor-El dreamed of something different for his son. Jor-El longed for a child who could forge his own part in society and not be beholden to the whims of a tyrannical regime from an ideological preserve. Zod and the Superman represent to his side of our queen. Whether Zod understand or not, he is not free. He can't shake his own ambition to renew his people and a culture. That level of control comes at a hefty cost, one that Zod is more than willing to pay. The narrative establishes his loyalty to Krypton as something that resulted not by choice but rather a genetic compulsion. His goal for Krypton alike, and he simply can't sacrilege until they succeed. Zod's laws of agency begets the laws of freedom for others, namely the people of art. In his quest, the annihilation of humanity would be in order, if it weren't for Superman, of course. Superman on the other hand shows us that freedom allows us to make a difficult choice. It then becomes our matter of heart, our mind. But it will always be an enemy to freedom, which ultimately places a high cost on his pursuit. There is also something to be said about the conflict between Zod and Superman being one of nature versus nurture. This has actually been an element of Superman's story long before Man of Steel. Baby Kel has crashed landing in the Kent from Lander was pernicious. After all, the spaceship could have landed just about anywhere. But Jonathan and Marsha and a very perfect couple of the job. For starters, they did not the alien child were two authorities. They installed the era and standards that moral code in younger Clark all brought out his upbringing so that principal center that make his a Superman who he is. Other stories depict to alternate realities where Call Al Crasher land is in other places to see how a different upbringing changes him. In a Superman Red Sunday, he is brought up in the Soviet Union. The result area drastically different. Jor may have been an anomaly, a Kryptonian who was simply smart and was enough to learn from his mistakes. However, Zod was one of many among the Kryptonian population who was born and bred for a test chamber. Parental effects were minimal, and he is only God's principle where child purpose he was born to fulfill. Much of Man of Film is defined by fatherhood. Both El and Jitten can't play an integral role in Superman's choices in the film final critically. No matter how much one is tied to a specific lineage, fatherhood is not defined by blood. In the idea that one's genetic and familiar history predetermine an individual part is shaped by Superman's eventual mission, irregardless what is actually work in tandem to set their son up for our future as a hero among humanity. Jonathan protects Clark and hides his secret from the world until day comes. God, Clark and Jor-El can copied his existence among humankind. But more importantly, Jonathan does not so sugarcoat the eventual decision that Clark is going to have to make. You have here to decide what kind of man you want to grow up to be, Clark, because whoever that a man is, good character or bad, he is going to change the world. It's our royalty relentlessly reminded his son of his power and grandeur would only magnify the persona he desired to become. However, We know Clark talks to Jor while his AI consumes aboard ship, or Jor-El finally acquires him to have prepared him for his entire life. You can save her. You can save her for all a jumper polyclims or clockwatchers loss as our SCAP implementer teachings of both fathers that make up our man who is the core of Man of Sail. Isa narrative is rooted in hope and fate. Here everything begins with J hope that he Cal will build a better world journey, the one he is leaving behind. Both of our parents exercises fit by sending Drina on a track through space with the hope that he's not lost out in the colder recess of the universe. Jor-El puts the entire gigantic history of our Krypton at stake with the gamble he takes on his son, both arriving on Earth soundly and growing to be a man of our virtue. Of course, we can't omit discussing Clark's encounter with Father Leon. After Zod becomes Clark to emerge here for the good effort, he questions whether Zod can be trusted. Conversely, he questions whether the human race can also be trusted to not let a part of our total destructions. Some things you have here to take a leap of faith. The part comes later, for Zed shows us exactly what happened. We and I hope is ending for the majority of the film. Zod unleashes a new drone from Forajon. He's willing to make it happen no matter how oral things have to get. When Superman destroys the Jay's chamber, Zod's hope evaporates. He then focuses on his rage, which is our endless forces for destruction until stopped. In General Zod's view, he is a savior and protector of his people. His goal is to embody those who think, as he clearly states to Superman in the ending of the film. He exists only to protect Krypton. The old remark that is the solely purpose for which I was born, and every action I take, no matter how violent or how cruel, is for the greater good of my people. So under a different lens, Zed is our cross to four of his people and a hero. Most militant radars believe that there is only right side of history. It's also difficult to ever convince them of their wrongdoing when their idea of right and wrong just does not match the much the rest of society's. Thankfully most would agree with the belief that genocide, extraterrestrial or not, is morally wrong. But again, those rules only support a narrow Kryptonian's perspective. Radicalism is often a product of the hopes of freedom. Krypton clearly formed a tyrannical regime outliving something as natural as conception, and but tight laws around a population's control doubled as a means of controlling those born into Kryptonian society, being genetically coded with our predispositions, ultimately removes open minds and freer thinker from the equation. Such control bears radicals who cling to an ideology fiercely. This gives them purpose and a reason for existing. Replan's government created our made man like Zod even after our planet. The alien world Solus Regime still echoes across the universe thanks to Zod's survival. Music, how this is the big one, is the moment that caused many Superman fans so to unravel in their seats. Superman killed General Zod. It's truly difficult to discuss the marriage era of Superman and his resistance to auto-inflicting that upon his enemy. We don't have in a comic book world where everything can be tied up nearly with our Bowen Man of Steel and various present Superman as if he is overworld and not some comic book fantasy. The closest to comparison to this moment could be Superman's Clash. We do miss the mentality of Superman in the comic book story linear, the seemingly indestructible monster is relentless, killing the only way he would stop his Superman kill him, which he did. Of course, Superman was ostensibly Superman, however in the concept is Samir is an all-powerful being willing to kill everyone loves human he can find in our fit of rage. He literally tells Gal he never stop as a human family with his heat vision. The choice is so unendable. Let Zod live and serial world destroy either or killed Zod. There is no magic reason or any possibilities of going back into the Phantom Zone is gone. The filmmakers put Superman in an impossible situation, or a bold and green movie like Jonathan and before Superman takes the road of the utilizations many lives or spirit at the cost of one. There is a sense of safety and comfort that comes with control. Conversely, when he feels out of control, that's dry anxiety and tension within us. While it might be natural, Man of Steel is a cautionary trail showing us that there must be a line in the sand somewhere. Capone took control of its people and the planet. Having done so, Kryptonians bred the population of our corrupt politicians, militant Zords and a careless scientist while jamming the Arrow world to destructions. Have you ever noticed the destroyed moon floating in the sky of the Kryptonian landscape? That was an Easter egg that references our point in comic book history where an irresponsible scientist launched an experimental rocket to launch us at our allied surface. Clearly that was a sign for where Kryptonian society was headed. Ultimately control is technical and will backfire always. The hope is that Superman can help humanity achieve a different future. You will give the people effort and ideal choose a drive toward. They will race here behind you. They will stumble. They will fall, but in time they will join you in the sun. Jor said to his adult son, Superman doesn't only have to be the hero who saves in the day because he is untouchable. He can set an example for humankind. Through the American government's self-for-fear, Superman at the end of film uses a spy of land to find Superman's home base. Superman forces them to accept their fear and have a little faith in him. Since the release of Man of Steel, many have wondered why director Zack Snyder and company chose to take a more scream and George on with their take on Superman. Part of that comes with the real world directory. Whether we believe it or not, the world is not always a sunny place. Metaphorically speaking, the film deals with glorying with his own humanity. He is not your Superman indifferent, at least not the one we know and love. Zod sent him grassing through buildings, and the Darius might be wondering how he can so careless, but it might be easily forgotten that he just learned how to fly more days ago. He has probably never thrown a leg puncher in his entire life, let alone saving a woman from a crashing spaceboard. Physical attributes aside, a Superman also must embrace his Kryptonian legacy alongside his human nature. It's a complicated feat that no one on Earth can relate to. However, he is in trouble over the desire to aid his fellow Kryptonians but defend humanity as a character's building experience. The greatest attribute of Superman is his composition. He does not relatably out of danger. This is evidenced by his restraint as a child when being built bodying filled fissures using our Superman. Closer even we know from the colorful pages of comic book. He understands his responsibilities of being better. He grabbed two men he wants to be after being forced to make difficult decision. The Man of Steel can be a true beacon of flight of revolt. Zack Snyder Man of Steel features numerous controversial elements, but one in particular has much more context and clarity after a decade. In A Man of Steel, a young man with a superpower named Clark Henry learns that he is actually an alien refugee named Kal-El from the planet Badgeon. Despite spending most of his life hiding his ability from the world, Clark is forced to define art as Superman when the General Zod Shannon needs our Kryptonian invention to remake art into a new Krypton. Man of Steel would become arguably the most popularizing Superman movie ever made. And as with the subsequent show movie Batman vs Superman, Dawn of Justice and Zack Snyder's Justice League, Snyder's storytelling with our lost son of Krypton Joan draws both of praise and condemnation. In the case of Man of Steel, with the arguably exception of the art scene of Jonathan Kent, Cave perhaps no element has been and as hotly debated as the movie's ending. Nonetheless, 10 years after Man of Steel released, it not only works for the movie itself, but for the tone of the DC established by Snyder. In the Man of Steel ending, after a mutual battle through this case of Metropolis with General Zod, Superman snaps neck when he attacks a concerned family with his heat vision. Criticism of the scene is generally rooted in Superman awaiting a no-kill rule in the comic and other adaptations. Moreover, Zod's death itself comes after a very destructive third act in which a large section of Metropolis is destroyed by Zod's world engine. The character as associated with the concept of hope as the Man of Steel is. Superman killing Zod fits into a larger debate over how dark a Superman story can go and whether standard disposition of Superman is an excessively somber one. Putting aside the issue of Man of Steel's Phantom Zone no longer being accessible by dim film final battle, meaning that there is no readily available presence for the ramping Zod to be put in Zor functions at the end of Man of Steel is philosophical setup for a Snyder Day movie. A Snow movie saw a very clear trend of replacing their heroes into situations in which making a difficult choices is necessary. On top of that, Snyder consistently opposes the broader questions of when a hero has gone too far and what would it take to bring them back into the light, particularly in the level of retributive justice. Ben Affleck's Batman is also in about when we Superman. Man of Steel acts as our spire for DCO in more ways than any, not just in being the franchise's first movie by presenting DC questions immediately with Superman's origin story and the formations of the Justice League and this year movie also shows the progression towards Superman's tradition additionally powerful imagery that Snyder had planned for the franchise. Man still star Superman from a point where even a justified killing is a harder learning experience for him about how harsh the world he is protecting can be. The progression from the story to Batman v Superman, Zack Snyder Justice League year, and Superman's ending and Snyder's planned Justice League sequel shows the journey of Superman to bringing hope to the world after upcoming the most rank-header of challenges. The Flash also puts some Superman's killing of Zod into a clear contest with the movie revisiting in now the events of Man of Steel through a Flashpoint-style charm travel story and now the alternate reality created by Barry Allen. Superman is captured and killed as an infant by Zod, with his cousin Sasha Scully arriving on Earth with the Grey and contacts instead. This version of reality goes very badly, with Zod killing him and taking the context then the young unable to undo it due to this outcome being an inevitably intersection of this reality. This sends so subtle message of Superman's importance to protecting Earth. In its ending, The Flash makes the implied argument that Superman is the only individual able to stop a General Zod's invention of art, and in so doing, it shines a spotlight on the ending of Man of Steel. With Superman as a last of defense against the villain of Zod's trend, Superman has also to make here the but necessarily call to put a stop at Zod's war at her good, even as he clearly does not enjoy taking her life. Snyder's DCO movie will surely remain a stoppings of never-ending examination and debate, with Man of Steel ending with the Superman killing General Zod makes more sense than ever. 2013 Superman's reboot Man of Steel is a controversial film in a number of ways. Various Christopher Nolan and writer Diane Lane have previously taken a freshly serious and grounded approach to Batman successfully with the Dark Knight trilogy. The two were now trying to apply the Batman Begins formula to Superman's story, and it proved difficult. Goa came up with the core idea for Man of Steel and wrote the secret play while Nolan helped get the film grown as our producer, and of course Zack set the production as the film's director at the time. Warner Brothers would neither confirm nor deny if Man of Steel might spawn an MCU-like universe for superheroes, but we know how in our hindsight it was the beginning of an overall franchise's plan that expanded with movies like Batman v Superman, A Dawn of Justice and Wonder Woman. Man still is a challenging film for some happens particularly when it comes to its ending. The Superman origin story of our first shot of first contact like twister on Carlex exposures Onard and when a Superman Henry Cavill reveals himself to the world, it triggers the arrival of the alien villain Zod Michael Shannon. The two have a knockdown fight across a metropolis causing massive amount of destruction to the city before Superman finally stops Zod by snapping his neck and killing him. Traditionally in the comics, a Superman does not kill folks, so Thea took a number of hardcore fans by surprise. Goya discussed these a controversial decision of Lent during our Comic-Con home panel hosted by Backstory magazine publisher Jeff Goldsmith. The whole longer interview focused on Go's approach to adopting comic to the big screen, and the discussions turned to a Man of Steel, at which find Roger admitted using the Batman's formula on Superman proved challenging. It's easier to work with a character like Batman realistically than it was with a human from another planet. There is a higher threshold of super suspensions of this belief with Superman that there is the Batman. The attempted with Man of Steel was to apply the same kind of standards. To tell the story of Man of Steel is a very realistic way, and to try to think about what would happen to the world if a character like that emerged. The entire premise of the movie was that if a character like this emerged from another world who had these kinds of power, it would be the biggest thing that ever happened in human history. Expanding upon that elastic approach, Gore and the filmmakers approached the ending by wanting to find a settlement between Superman and Zod, two incredibly powerful aliens, which would then put Superman in a position where he had no choice but to kill his foe. We were trying to, if you track the story all the way through in terms of his character emerging and his maturity and fully understanding the kind of power he has, and when they fight the kind of divisions that is caused by it, it's no to some frivolous efforts almost like 9/11 when they fight. We were trying to come up with a stalemate where he could not. There had been a comics editorial decision in our Superman does not kill. It was a rule, but that's a rule that's imposed on our fictional world and was just true but sometimes whether it's so lighter or are people in love enforcement. And again, on a mature Superman, this is the first time he's ever flaw in the story. He would have just flown for the first time days before that. He is not aware of the extent of his power at all. He's finding somebody who said I won't stop, who said you can't put me in prison, I won't ever stop. We wanted to put him in a style ailment. Goya said the whole idea of Superman's killing Zod was born out of trying to take a big swing, something that had paid off when he and Nolan made Batman Begins and Dark Knight. I absolutely understand a lot of people and had problems with it. When you have had a hand in adopting these things, you want to be as respectful to the core material as possible, but you also can't protect against failure. You have to take big swings. With big swings, there are big rewards. We took in Rome's winger swings with Batman Begins and The Dark Knight that turned out to be well received. But we were trying to tell a different kind of Superman story. A Superman story that had not been told before. It required us taking some bigger swing. We talked about it. We talked about whether or not people would accept to it, and if LDC had accepted it. It does not mean it was no mistake. But if you sit there and you say I don't want it to take any risk, I am worried I might offend a portion of audiences. I don't think that is a particularly healthy way to try to make a film or a television show. The screenwriter recalled a sense that was never filmed between Gina Turner and a young Clark that would have further seeded the idea of taking a life with going curious how to film would have been received had that scene been shot and put into movie. Ironically, there was a scene we wrote that did not get filmed in which Jonathan takes younger Clark hunting and they kill a deer and a young Clark is just gutted by the act. And Jonathan says it's a powerful thing to take a life even if you are forced to take a life. That was a scene that did not make it into the final movie. We never filmed it. There was also a Man of Steel alternate ending that would give our German and out and that don't want to go through the killing Zod, but Go was not a huge fan. The idea was the Superman would there was enough of those sort of graveyard ports on the ship that ends up becoming the fortress of solitude that he's able to put Zod back into the Vendetta through into the space. We did talk about it and maybe some people would have been happier with that, but it felt like a cop-out of story that we were telling. Indeed, if you were going to take our swing as a big-ass Man of Steel overall, go for it. Superman killing Zod is not the only major shift to the Superman story in the movie. It's an entirely different chill approach than had ever been done before on film, and while some loved it and some hated it, you can't say Snyder and Go and the rest of the filmmaking team did not take an ambitious swing. Go added that he views the movies he made as stories in relation to comic book canon and with the regards to Man of Steel as Superman's origin story. Tim King as Zod would be the originary no-kill role that would endure in film to come. I think of the film almost as the LC war stories like Superman, Red Sun or something like that. To me the comic book are the comic books and the film that we were involved in are these elsewhere world stories that exist within their own universe, and that was the intention is that's the one he was in a terrible position and then afterwards he read that he could never do it again. He did not come out of anger. He was forced into it. But that was the one. But Gura also makes a good point in that canon is a male label thing nowadays. It only takes one radical approach to change what canon means to a people. Again, right or wrong, and I adore the Richard Donner film by this was a new version. Batman and Superman, these other Hollywood characters are constantly being reinvented, and the fact is that there is really any real canon. Prior to Alan Moore writing To Kill Joe, Barbara Gorgon was not a paralogic, and turns as someone else comes along and adds something and that becomes part of the canon and is adopted and changed again. Even looking at the marvelous cinematic universe movies, those films have made significant changes to character storylines and even original stories from the comic, but they are immensely popular and well received. What is canon anyway? Go acknowledges in the interview that A Man of Steel did not work for some people and even seems a bit unsure as to whether they made all the right cards in making that film. But again, it's harder not to admire the ambition that went into the crafting this fresh spin on Superman. You can watch the full QR below, in which Goya also makes an impression play for people to social distance and wear masks as he shares our very personal story of how this pandemic has affected his family. Wear your mask please. Music. Man of Steel began the DCO in 2013 with the film's ending including several climatic moments with all the necessary setup for the future of the franchise. Initially the critical reviews of Man of Steel were not overwhelmingly positive. Audiences seemed to respond to Zack Snyder's to albeit controversial intonation after Clark and since then the film has been looked back and more fondly, with Superman first film in this continuity regarded highly among the CO movie ranking. We are now watching the GCU movies in release, Order Man of Steel was the first two installment responsible for Thea kickstarting what was to become Warner Brothers' sharing universe of DC character as it is known from the franchise as a success or lack of therefore after Man of Steel. This did not come to fruition and several cancelled DCO movies and our complete reboot of the own film. Despite the failures of the duo, Man of Steel can largely be considered one of the franchise's more revered installments regardless of his success as a sharing in a new DC cinematic universe with compelling characters, outstanding visual directions and a fantastic musical score from Hans Zimmer. Man of Steel was a solid start from the go with the film impactfully ending effectively setting up what was to come here in the future. Man of Steel core conflict enters Gal, a Kryptonian child who was exiled to Earth at his home planet was being destroyed by natural causes. As Kryptona was destroyed, a military general named Zod and his sympathizers while simply exiled Judd Planton's own for attempting to copitude in an attempt to save the Krypton. After Cal is raised on Earth and becomes a man, Zod and his allies accept the plan zone. They travel to Earth to find Gal informing him of their plan to restore Krypton using transforming devices to transform Earth's atmosphere into one resembling that of Krypton's. Given that Cal now knows as Clark and was raised on Earth, he imposed his plan. This begins the central conflict of the film as Clark rushes to stop Zod's plan to destroy Earth completely. During a Man of Steel's ending, Clark finds and destroys a terraforming device in the Indian Ocean while the US Army destroys the most powerful of those machines. The World Engine as destructions causes a reaction that results in the Saw soldiers being exiled to a phantom zone with Saw viewing it to destroy Earth completely. Out for revenge now that all chances of Krypton's revival are gone. Superman engages Zod and the two are locked in the compact in Metropolis. Eventually after a hugely damaging battle, Superman again gains the upper hand and over Zod. The former kills the latter screaming out of rage and guilt that he was forced to kill the only other surviving member of Kern that he knows of. Despite the devilsness of Superman's killing Zod, Man of Steel does not an adequate job of explaining why this needed to be happen in a way that adds an extra layer of depth to the film's ending. After Superman and Zod battle across Metropolis, the former concerned letter in a train station, Superman grapples with Zod who begins inching his laser eyes toward a family of best friends, stating that if Clark loves the people of Earth so much, he can mourn for them in order to save the family. Clark is forced to snap Zod's neck, ending his threat to the people of Earth once and for all. Superman killing Zod and Man of Steel is undoubtedly one of the most divisive desires plot points in the entire film. Based on Superman's many DC comic stories, audiences felt that Grok should not have had to kill someone to save the people of Earth. Superman is forced to be in an ideal of hope optimisms and a pure good heartless dead meaning his decisions to kill Zod no matter how much a pain Clark in the film was met with criticism or is true that given the overwhelming power of Superman the character would have been able to defeat Zod without murdering him something Man of Steel evidently does not reflect. Unimplied throughout the events of the film lacking in occupations that are iconic to the character in DC comic. By the end of Man of Steel, this is justified with Clark and taking a job as a reporter for the Daily Planet. This not only puts him closer to Lois Lane and sets up their future relationship, but also allows him to keep his ear to his crown regarding dangerous situations on Earth, bringing the gap between the Superman's and Clark's future. Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice. Clark is one of the film's the old beginners 2016 Justice Snake reveals added central across the film making him integral to the story. Shazam Superman's appear in the film's final throw as a faceless cameo. Zack Snyder's Justice League. Snyder is our true vision of the 2017 film includes our similar role for Superman so with our greater personal arc. Superman appears in the final episodes among other Justice League members through another faceless role. 2022. The Flash Superman's appears on a news clip as our faceless cameo as well as the recreation of Justice League events of 2023. The sequel to Man of Steel was 2016's Batman vs. Superman: Dawn of Justice with his former films ending in the greatly setting of the continuation of the story. Man of Steel ending with Clark taking on the moniker of Superman and the job at a planet ties into the beginning of Batman vs. Superman with the Clark often shows using his connection as a reporter to continue adding the world as his superpower larger ago. However, the government of the world began holding Superman accountable for his actions stemming from a partial destruction of Metropolis during the fight with Zod in Man of Steel's ending. This leads to via congressional hearing to hold him accountable in Batman vs Superman, with Man of Steel's ending directly setting his up. Also, Man of Steel's ending adequately sets up the introduction of the GCO's Dark Knight. In Batman vs Superman, it was revealed that Bruce Wayne was present in Metropolis on the day of Cloud and Saucer battle. A vain industrious building in the city was destroyed, meaning several of Bruce's friends and colleagues were killed. This lazy relations to begin to engage Superman, whom he deems a dangerous alien that should not be above the law. The setting of the titular conflict of the film Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice was not the only DC film to reference Man of Steel after the latter's 2013 to release. In 2023, The Flash was released, with the events of the film also connecting to Superman's battle with Zod in Metropolis. The Flash reveals that Barry Allen gained his super speed-based powers around the same time as Superman's revealed himself. Feeling the burden of our responsibility to help people of using these powers, the Flash traveled to Metropolis in order to add Superman's sword. However, the Flash reveals that the task was too great for a rookie superhero Blackberry, traumatizing him into taking his regulate power much more seriously. As evident to final minute of the movie's glossed over Clark's giving process, and I see him taking care of business in the superhero soon after Man of Steel released in a music. 4 months after Man of Steel was released, playwright David Go also spoke up about the controversial landing, which plenty of people were still thinking about. K said that he knew ahead of time scene was going to be a controversial like Snyder. He said that he wanted you to put superhero in any possible situation to save the lives of the adopted species. Speaking on the Brothers issue of Superman's, we also are compared to the greater track owner Superman to the success of the Dark Analogy, where Man of Steel bringing a Superman began type story. He has not started what is the feelings are over about the Zod killing, but he did a comment in 2013 on how the events so far Man of Steel will shape, with Clark as like here in Batman vs Superman Day of Justice. To know that the alien threat to Earth has been defeated, and Clark is no longer alone because he has someone else to share his secrets with. We likely want to change the broing clock that we saw for a fair portion of Man of Steel. She speculated that when we meet up with the Clark again in 2016, he will be more confident and coming into his own. In other words, more elements sense of the Superman way we have grown up with. Look, we could continue debating about whether Clark was right to kill Zod to save life, or if he should have chosen a charred alternative to defeat him. Beauty of the fact is that the journal is danger and assuming those rumors about his corpse are incorrect. The questions now is whether killing Zod will drive Clark's character development and the science finds. Will Superman never kill again? That's not a guarantee, especially if he ends up fighting more enemies with equal or greater power levels than him, like Darkseid or Doomsday. At the very least, we can expect that we won't be snapping onion necks or using hate vision or normal art of criminal. He will stop their crime as suspect. They will get a driving court, and if proven guilty, they will be sent to prison and then probably escape, kicking off another round of cat and mouse. Regardless, Superman was raised with a good moral compass, and now Chad is still a quite from a certain web-headed moral competitor. With great power comes a great responsibility. He has the power to stop bad people for hurting other beauty, to set an example of humankind. He can't play Judge Jim and executioner again. Of course, just because someone says they are here to help does not mean you can't believe them. There are many who think that Superman's presence reflects our danger to our planet, most notably industrial like Sludger and glutton Sitcher Wiglin. Immediately, Batman is likely more concerned about the welfare of his fellow human, while there is more hat-driven and believes Superman to be a threat to everything he has built. Either way, they will be putting plans into effect to deal with the Krypton and the Cobbs case. This means temporarily coming to boss with the Man of Steel. There are also questions around Jor-El, who says Superman as a tool for US government, with China especially not wanting a Superman anywhere near their airspace. It's ironic they feel this way because quasi the United States is just as he cautions it towards Superman. I'll choose General a swinger opinion of his abroad. He has not been able to convince the government that a Superman is a force for good. It was reported last year that it will be as at the capital where Superman has to answer for the damage caused in Metropolis. Half of the city citizens believe he is responsible for the death in the Man of Steel since Zod only come here looking for him. So we are probably don't seeking anybody in Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice. It will take him longer to convince the world population that has not going to one day using his powers to slaughter innocent or take over the planet. Cool has work to do to our art and the trust. Hopefully the 2016 team of film and a full state of announce either this safe comic will be able to accomplish these a conception of Marvel, DC, Star Wars, John W.S. and director. As you may or may not remember from my review of Superman Return, I have never really had a stronger connection with either Superman as our character or in any sort of cinematic experience. I have seen that film and I have definitely seen the original Superman film at some point. Maybe I have seen part of the second movie, but I have just never had enough interest in other character to seek out a cinematic version of him. If that was not reason enough to have doubts about Man of Steel, the fact that movie was directed by Zack, the hack Snyder did not get me super excited about seeing it either. Even Snyder does not have an interesting visual style. All of his films like tape a character and story. Even I had my daughter about this film being my good. I was actually quite intrigued by how Snyder would take a character that I had no connection with to see how he would make a Superman look cool. And from some reviews I had Snyder seemed to make a pretty good movie. I'll told you more good reviews came out. The more negative ones came out. So I was totally willing to get this movie either completely blow me away or be a steaming pile of fire. Ultimately, the film ended up not really making me feel much of anything, with a slight edge being given to the pile of fire end of the spectrum with the planet of Krypton being destroyed. Scientist J-Result puts his baby into a spaceship and sends him out to a distant planet. Decades later, we see a man working on a ship fishing for a crab, jumping into a burning oil drilling rig and saving everyone on it despite it being on fire. That man, as you could expect, was Clark and Henry 7A despite the fact that he does not tell anyone his real name and quickly gets out of town after the rescue. Clark is adrift going from one job to the next and never revealing his identity to anyone. Clark is able to get involved with the mysterious discovery of a sheep that being discovered frozen in the architect that is from his home planet and a hologram of his father's Arkaisa in his real name is Cal where he comes from and information about his people. This information is also seen by a reporter who has snagged onto a ship. Lost Amy Adams but Clark seems to trust her, despite then abandoning her and keeping his business while Louis tries to track down the origins of the mystery man. Everyone on Earth is sent a mysterious message from former KP Johnny and variant General Zod Michaela Shannon about how they need to join in Kal-El or their planet will be destroyed. Even after Kal-El willingly turns himself in, Zod knows that Earth must be destroyed if there's any chance to keep the Kryptonian spaces alive. Kaelia Clocker and Sharka Superman Down don't really agree with this and punching comments. After the punching is over, the movie ends. Yeah, I would say that about covers it. Very nice of Michael Shannon to bring his own onto set. Speaking strictly from the plot, the movie follows more of a science fiction tone with the fact that Superman is an alien and general public react to him as such. In that respect, it's definitely a more interesting original story than most other comic book superhero movies are currently being made. I did not really mention the flashback that were shown to help give you a better sense of who the characters of Clark was and his upgrade bringing on a small form canons with Gavin Costner and Diane Lane acting as his parents. While those actors played the role of the parents, it's not like Lane's dad was actually Kevin Costner. Anyways, Clark parent want Clark to be safe, so they emphasize how important it is that he refrains from using any of his superpower even if it means that people could get hurt from his inaction. I really like the tone of some of the opening sequences where Clark has chosen a life of isolation so that he can rescue people as necessarily without bringing unwanted attention to his personal life for anyone Clark might hold close to him. I also really enjoy the character of Zod as he was not necessarily figure of anger and Big merely as a character who has this name here to do one thing and one thing only. In that fact, some of the mythology of children who grew up on Krypton was that they were all biological designed to fulfill one destiny, and in Zod's case, It was to be a variant. The only thing we cared about was the survival of Kryptonians, and he did not care what planet or our spaces showed him drowned. When it got toward the end and those plans were ruined by Superman, it was only that he acted out of rage, and when he did, why better to have pull of him than Michaela Shannon the character did. Drifter and Azor's character were really stronger, and the tone of the character always a product of two words but feels a lot too involved were things I really enjoyed. But as for as much I enjoy those aspects of that things I did not enjoy felt all the more terrible. I mentioned how I can generally enjoy a Snyder film at any aesthetic level, but this movie looked terrible. I get it. Hey Zack, you can reduce the colors or saturations to get a gritty effect. Due to it's become such a glitch with all of your film and it's lost its appeal. There was sequence and that was washed out, yet it was felt like I was watching something in black and white. I understand the departure from the more bright colorful Superman films. Due to everything felt so unnaturally colder that it brought more attention to how fake everything looked. Superman and Zod are practically God's own art, so I appreciate the attempts made at showing the mass amount of carnage and the destruction and would result in the collaging. When these two finally joke it out, everything looked so bad that I felt like I was watching one of the Transformers films or the Matrix Evolution. Oh my god, it was so boring to watch. In the climax of Avengers, you have just as much as carnage and collateral damage happening, but you see the active attempt to declare out the city so these people could they stay safe. And every time you see a building get destroyed I saw clear of people who were advocated. Not so much the case with Man of Steel, as you are constantly seeing people running around the city, most likely drank by the thousands as Metropolis clumber around her. Speaking of fighting, the opening sequence shows Jor-El and Zod going to try to drive here with one another. And if Jor-El was not designed to be a warrior, how did he get to be so good at kicking this suit out of God? Also, why was this scene where Jor-El opened up closest and basically told Kala hi poor the Superman soldier because I told you to, so why did not tell mind that a random lady just learns his true identity after spending so much of his life avoiding the public's attention, hopefully without spoiling anything. Why we are supposed to feel anything about a Superman and how difficult it is for him to handle Zod without any prior information as to why it's so difficult for him. Unfortunately, there are so many questions like that about simply things were similar to Superman who turns get you really frustrated at good ideas and concepts that were present only to have them abandoned. When I first learned that the Warner Brothers Studios and DC Comics planned to release another Superman movie, I had a great dream news with an and toss. In fact, my first reaction was sheer frustrations. The last DC Comics movie I wanted to see was another Superman movie. There was so many reasons for my negative reaction to the news of a new Superman movie. The last one I saw was a 2006 Superman Return, which had been directed by Bryan Singer. There had also been 2 television series about a Man of Steel in the past 20 years. Lois and Clark Adventures of Superman's 1993 1997 and His Small World 2001 to 2011. The film subsidies for Marvel's comics have shown a willingness to release movies future was after comic book character. On the other hand, DC Comics seems to be stuck on either Superman or Batman for television and movie material. There have been minor exceptions to the rule, including the Oliver Queen Green Arrow character that became a regular on Smallville 2011 film, The Green Lantern, and the recent WB television series Arrow G. Green Arrow. Again, a Wonder Woman has not been a subject of a movie or a television series in her own right since the Linda Carter series found in 1970. An unsuccessful television series about the Flash failed to last one season and Aquaman merely served as a character on Smallville for the new episodes. I had one other reservation regarding the announcement of a new Superman movie. The producers had chosen Zack Snyder to direct the film, and I have never been a fan of his past film, at least the one I have seen, namely the very successful 300, the critically acclaimed The Watchmen and Sucker Punch. When I learned he had been selected to direct the new Superman film Man of Steel, my interior was sunk even further. However, I saw the movie's new trailer last spring and my oppositions to the movie began to wane. What can I say? It impressed me. So, I decided to open my mind and give Man of Steel a chance. Thanks to David Eske's second play and the story created by him and Christopher Nolan, Man of Steel follows the origins of Superman. Well, Somewhat the movie year begins on the planet of Krypton, where scientist Jor-El assists his wife in Thea virtue of their newborn son called LG after years of exploiting the plant's natural resources by the plant zoo inhabitants. The planet has an unstable core and faces imminent destruction. Jor and Lara plans to send their son to Earth to ensure his survival. They also infuse his cells with our gigantic borders of the entire Kryptonian reign that the Lenin military commander General Zod desire. Zod and his followers commit a military coup and a general murders Jor. After learning of what he later did with the Genetic Codex, Zod and his followers area immediately captured and branched to the Phantom Zone. When Krypton finally is self-destructive via the explosion, free Zod and his purpley people, sitting them on a search of younger Kal-El and Gents at their words was colonized by Kryptoniana. Kyle eventually lands on Earth, an intermediate of countryside, a farmer and his wife Jonathan, and March and adopts her and raises him, renaming him Clark Kent. However, Clark's Caponian psychology or physiology gives him super ability to own, which raises a lot of social problems for him. Jonathan eventually reveals to Clark that he came from another planet and advises not to use his ability in public. Following Jonathan's death, Clark spends several years roaming the country and working at jobs where he deals with his grief and save people in secret. He eventually infiltrates a scientific discovery of a Kryptonian scout spaceship in the Arctic, which had been discovered by the military. Also, there is a reporter from the Drink Planet named Lois Lane. Clark, who is unaware of being followed by Lois, enters the alien ship. It allows him to communicate with the preserved conscious of Jor-El in the form of a hologram. Jor-El reveals Clark's origin and the extinctions of his race and tells Clark that he was sent to Earth to bring hope to mankind. Meanwhile, General Zod and his crew pick up a Kryptonian distress signal friend from the ship Clark had discovered to own. Zod arrives and demands the human surrender Kal-El, whom he believes that he had Codex or else will be destroyed. So what did I not like about Man of Steel? For one, I dislike this shaky camera photography used by Mia Morgry. I dislike it used by Paul Greengrass in some of his movies. I dislike its use in Quantum of Solace, and I certainly did not like its use in this film. It made the final confrontations between the Superman and the Kryptonians more confusing than again. David Brainer's editing certainly did not help, not in the scene or in the burning oil rig sequence in the movie's first half hour. I have been a fan of Hans Zimmer for a year, but I found his score for this movie rather heavy-handed, especially his use of horns. Speaking of Superman and the Kryptonians' final configurations, I thought it was a bit over the top in regard to the destructions inflicted upon Metropolis. It reminded me of final action sequence in Iron Man, which I also did not care for. Fortunately, there was a great deal more about Minos that I liked it, and I find this amazing considering my past opinion of director Zack Snyder. David S. When Christopher Nolan wrote a first-rate origin story of Superman, I noticed that they utilize the same or similar story set that they had uses in Dark Knight trilogy. Instead of following Superman to face his most famous adversary in the first film, Nolan utilized Superman's Agoniana origins to play a major role in the film story instead of Lex Luthor. Superman's main nemesis in Man of Steel proved to be a General Zod. Some fans of the franchises were annoyed by this. I was not. Nolan also did a first-rate job in exploring Clark and Superman's emotional growth, the loneliness he had endured during his childhood in flashbacks, and those years he wandered before discovering the Kryptonian ship in the Arctic and his witness toward the human race. I especially do not recall any previous Superman story or television series exploring the latter. How very original of Go and Nolan. Some fans have complained about the different twist that Nolan and director Zack Snyder made to the Superman might, especially in his relationship with reporter Lois Lane. I do not understand the complaints considering the number of twists and changes that have been made to the Superman might in movies and especially television during the past 20 years, and honestly the truth, Superman's relationship with Louis made the story of fresher. Also, I did not particularly care for the overjob destruction featured in Man of Steel. I must admit that its special effect Fisher in that last scene impressed me very much. I was also impressed by their work in the sequences that first Superman's fight against Fora and the other Capian in a small while, but the one sequence that featured some great special effects happened to be the one uncaptioned. I found the effects very beautiful. In fact, There were other aspects of our sequences that really impressed me, namely Alex M.C. Dawes' production designer and collision set decoration, Kima Sinclair and Chris Former art directioner, and especially James R. Asen and Mikhailovic costume design. Some have complained by the lack of red shorts for Superman's a costumier, but I did not miss them. More importantly, I liked how sincere Glare and Former linked Superman's costume with those worn by many of the Kryptonians. When he first heard that Han had been hired to portray Clark and Superman, I must admit that I was somewhat take-arabic. Mind you, the idea of a British actor portraying an American comic book character was nothing new. Thanks to Kristen's base portrayal of Bruce Wayne Vane, Batman, and the Anglo-Americana Andrew Ogfield's recent portrayal of Spider-Man, I only felt uncertain if she could portray a Midwesterner with our proper accent. Okay, I am not an expert in the Midwestern except accent. Buta Savers handled the American accent rather well. More importantly, he gave a superb enough for farmers as a quite emotional Clark and who had spent a good number of years our loneliness. I was surprised at Anya Adams and signed on to portray Dahlia Planet reporter Lois Lane. I did know to expect her to appear in a comic book, but I must admit that I really enjoyed her performance, especially since Harlow is prayed to be a lot less blind about Superman's secret identity and more willing to track down the truth. Michael Shannon effectively utilized that same intensity that provided for his Nelson when agent role in HBO saw in this performance as a single-minded Kryptonian General Zod, and Gross proved to be even more scary than Shannon as our second-in-command. Lisa Fisherborn given intense performance as our Barry White, and Onsen said to Daily Planet to Russell cross the door. I'll not only approve to be a cosmetic but something far about us. I will let Zorius provide a great deal for pose and emotion in her performance as Superman's mother. Lara Lowe and Diane Lane pro to be the movie's emotional rock in her Jota Arta performance as Marta Kay, Superman's adopted mother, and Kevin's customary portrayal of John Turn proved to be just as charismatic as CO and as emotional as Lara. The movie also featured some solid performance from the likes of Richard Skiff, Michael Kelly, and Christopher Milan. I was really impressed with Henry Lennox's performance as our commanding yet paranoid General Swank. Ken of Seal had a new problems, but I believe that the movie possessed a great grill more via including first-rate story created by David Gore and Christopher Nolan, and a superb cast led by talented Henry Cavill as Clark and Superman. Was very surprised by Zack's action, especially since he managed to steal some of his less than pleasant excess in past film, and at the same time effectively helm a first-rate movie. For the first time I found myself being more pleased by a movie directed by Sandra during General Zod's jump scope. Only dying was script ship scientist Jor-El Pisky's son KLG, the planet first a natural-born child for centuries until space crashing on Earth. The child is raised by the loving Kedna and learned to keep his immense ascendant and super-sensory reception secret, but when the Akasi appears on a 23 years later it is totally time for K. Clark say to reveal himself. Superman has never seen Zack character to release, or at least to make it interesting on screen. Thick-necked, secure, serious, and usually Ben will hardly be wise an actor or even a right to shine material note like Batman is someone to really get your teeth into. There is an interior to explode him, a whole murky cavern, the troubled childhood, the phobia, the anger, the guilt, the discipline with the Batman is Christophe and Bale found and exploited so well. You can climb in Sadia and get your hands dirty. He blurses, he ablaze, he breaks. He does not fly, he falls with style. Superman can literally jump over the moon. Bullets bones off his bulge like pectoral. It is for harder to get inside that invulnerable and morally burnished to exist. Yes. He is like Vane and Orphana, but when brought up by a loving couple in the heart he are peopled by country. He is also to all intent and purpose our God. He may look homogeneous but he is not human to misquote Shakespeare. Try to pick him, he will not bleed. We are pretty sure he's not even ticklish. Christopher found his way in a Wire Daily Planet reporter Clark, and in Reeves's draft draws our humble searching bumbling side of cool immediately likable somebody relatably someone normal, but he does not have that luxury. Writer David Cam under the ages of Chris Nolan is not paying tribute or past stitching the Richard Donner or Richard Lester movie. Bryan Singer already tried that, and despite Superman Return many overlook the merits he did not connect with audience in Goy. Nolan and and director Zack Snyder's new take on his origin story. The Calder is now contrast between our spec clone and Annie, the primary color arm. It is between a crotrophy under Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman 1993 to 1997 and Small Life Year 2001 to 2011. The film's obstinate willingness to release movies which area a vast array of their comic book. On the other hand, DC Comics seems to be stuck on either Superman or Batman for television and movie material. There have been minor exceptions to the rule, including the Oliver Queen Green Arrow, a character that became a regular on Smaller, while the 2011 film The Green Lantern and the recent WB television series Arrow Green Arrow again. Wonder Woman has not been a subject of a movie or a television series in her own right since the Linda Carter series from the 1970s, an unsuccessful television series about The Flash to last one season and Echo, and merely served as a quest character on A Small World for new episodes. I had other reservations regarding the announcement of a new Superman movie. The producer had chosen Zack Snyder to direct the film, and I have never been a fan of his past film, at least the honors I have seen, namely the very successful 300, the critically acclaimed Ghostman and a Sucker Punch. When I learned he had been selected to direct the new Superman film, Man of Steel, my intrigue moved further. However, I saw the movie's new trailer last spring and my positions to the movie began to win. What can I say? It impressed me. So, I decided to open my mind and give Man of Steel a chance. Thanks to David Goyer's screenplay and the story created by him and Christopher Nolan, Man of Steel follows the origin of Superman. Wildly somewhat, the movies began on the planet of Krypton, where scientist Jor-El assists his wife in the birth of their newborn son called El due to the years of exploiting the parents' natural resources by the planet's inhabitants. The planet has an unstable core and faces imminent destruction. Jor and Lara plans to send their son to Earth to ensure his survival. They also infuse the cells with a genetic codex of the entire Kryptonian Christ, something that planet military commander General Zod desire. Zod and his followers commit a military group and his general murders Jor-El. After learning what he later did with the Chantic Codex, but Zod and his followers are immediately captured, banished to the Pan Zone. When Krypton finally self-destructs, the explosion frees Zod and his people, setting them on a search for young Kal-El and gently Codex and otherwise colorized by Kryptonian Kal eventually lands on Earth, and in the middle of the countryside a farmer and his wife Jonathan and Martin adopts and raises him, renaming him Clark Kent. However, Clark Kryptonian psychology gives name super ability or not, which raises a lot of social problems for him. Jonathan eventually reveals a Clark that he came from another planet and advises not to use his ability in public. Following Jonathan believed Clark spent several years roaming the country and working at older job. While he deals with his grip and to save people in secret, he eventually infiltrates a scientific discovery of Kryptonian scouts in the Architect, which had been discovered by the military. Also, there is a reporter from the Dahlia planet named Lois Lane. Clark, who is unaware of being followed by Lois, enters the alien ship. It allows him to communicate with the preserved consequences of Jor-El in the form of a hologram. Jor-El reveals Croc's origin and the extinctions of his scarce, and tells Croc that he was sent to the Earth to bring a hope to mankind. Meanwhile, General Zod and his new pickup are Kryptonian distress signal sent from the ship had discovered on Earth. Zod arrives and demands a human surrender call. El home whom he believes he is a Codex or SR he will be destroyed. So what did I not like about Man of Steel? For one, I dislike the shaky coma photography used by Mia Morgry. I dislike it used by Paul Greencross in some of his movies. I dislike his use in The Quantum of Souls, and I certainly did not like his uses in this film. It made the final confrontations between the Superman and the cave Shannon more confusing than again. David Brainer's editing certainly did not help, not in the senior scene or in the burning oil dick sequence in the movie first half an hour. I have been a fan of Hans Zimmer Warrior, but I found he scored for this movie, and especially his use of horns. Speaking of Superman and the Kryptonians' final confirmations, I thought it was a bit over the top in the regard to the destructions inflicted upon Metropolis. It reminded me of final action sequence in Iron Man 3, which I also did not care for. Fortunately, There was a great deal more about Man of Steel that I liked, and I find he's amazing considering my past opinion of director Zack Snyder. David S. Goyes and Christopher Nolan wrote our first straight-again story for Superman. I noticed that they utilized the same or similar story, instructive that they harder using the Dark Knight trilogy instead of allowing Superman to face his most famous adversely in the first film. Gore and Nolan utilized Superman's iconic origin to play a major role in the film story. Instead of Flex Luthor, Superman's male name as in Man of Steel proved to be a General Zod. Some fans of these franchises were annoyed by this. I was not. Garen also did a first-rate job in exploring Clark and Superman's emotional growth to the loneliness he had endured during his childhood in flashbacks and those years he wandered before discovering Gema Kryptonian hip in the Arctic and his awareness toward the human race. I especially do not recall any previous Superman story or television series exploring the latter. How very original Goya and Nolan. Some fans work out complaint about the different twist that Goya, Nolan and director Zack Snyder made to the Superman, especially in his relationship with the reporter Lois Lane. I do not understand the complaints considering the number of twists and changes that have been made to the Superman might in movies and especially television during the past 28 years, and honestly the twist to clock as Superman's relationship will lose made the story fresher. Although I did not particularly care for the over-the-top destruction featured in Man of Steel, I must admit that the special effects feature in that last scene impressed me very much. I was also impressed by their work in the sequence that features Superman fight against Jor-El and the other Kryptonian in a small but one sequence that features some creator special effects happen at a BG-1 on Krypton. I found the effects very beautiful. In fact, there were other aspects of their sequences that really impressed me, namely, Alex McAdoo's production design, Annie Kanzaya said decorations, Kim Skincare, I. Sinclair and Chris Former directions, and especially James Weeks' costume design. Some have complained by the lack of red shorts for Superman's costume, but I did not miss them. More importantly, I liked how scenes clearer and formless linked Superman's costume with those worn by many of the Kryptonian. When I first heard that Henry Cavill had been hired to portray Clark's Superman, I must admit that it was someone taken aback. Man who the idea of a British actor portraying an Americana comic book actor was nothing new, and took his portrayal of Bruce Wayne Batman under the angle Americans and Garfield to resign Bry of Spider-Man. I only felt too uncertain if she could portray a Midwesterner with the proper accent. Okay, I am not an expert in a Midwestern accent. Buta Seville handled the American accent rather well. More importantly, he gave our spur performance as a quick yay to emotional clock and who had spent a good number of years in the loneliness. I was as surprised at Amy Adams and signed on to portray Planet Report was done. I did not expect her to appear in comic book her movie, but I must admit that I really enjoyed her performance here, especially since Harlow is proved to be a lot less blind about Superman's secret to identity and more willing to track down the truth. Michael's Shannon effectively utilized that same intensity that provided for his Nelson when Algin Trolley in HBO's Broad Rock Empire in his performance as a single-minded Kryptonian General Zod, and the G-Troll proved to be even more scary than Shannon as Zora second in command. The less verbal Frey, less Fisher and Byrne given intense performance as Pyginon says editor of Daily Balanita Races closed. Jor-El not only proved to be a charismatic but something of a badass. Zora provided a great deal of battle and emotion in her performances as Superman's mother. Laurel Evangelina Land proved to be the movie's emotional rock in her down-to-earth performances. Amart and Superman's adopted murderer and Kashner's portrayal of Janin's Kana proved to be just as charismatic as across Jor-El and emotional as Joel. The movie also featured some solid performance from the likes of Richard Skiff, Michael Kelly and Christopher Milan. I was really impressed with Harry Len's performance as a commanding yet paranoid General Swanvik. Man of Steel had a few problems, but I believe that the movie possessed a great deal more visuals, including our first-rate story created by David S. Goyes and Case of Arnellen, and a superb cast led by a talented Henry Cavill as Clark and Superman. But I was very surprised by Zack's sign direction, especially since he managed to score come some of his less than pleasant excess in his first film and the same time effectively in Helmer first-rate movie movie for the first time, I found myself being more than pleased by a movie directed by Zack Snyder and David Ayer with some help from Christopher Nolan team up to bringing their vision of modern Superman and what may possibly be the start of cinematic universe experiences in making great movies, a starring Cap joining protagonist. So this outing should be no different. Find out if they repeat success with their being Blue Boys out after the jump. The action and special effects area beautiful. Snyder is the top of his game here and the acting is all solid. The story is very problematic, weighted down by reimagines and coincidence. Man of Steel keeps his name opening beauty takes a lot into it. Not only is script shown a body employed due to duty over a harvesting of resources, but there is also a rebellion led by General Zod happening. Jor-El also steals a codex that is responsible for the Gantic and a changing for the Kryptonius, which he encourages to really reinforce the dress is a metaphor of Superman if the S of bit convention messy and drenched in expositions and Leona. Congratulations. I know how the first I heard how the film felt. It's not terrible, but it's a sign of somewhat lazy script that needed at least a more good hero. Everything else about the movie is pretty great, and on CI everything has been more or less set up. It really hits and it's right. I say unfortunately the weekend part of this movie as full of expositions that really made the first part of the movie and relies on coincidence and a Kryptonian technology make offense too much to get the plot going. There is also a lot of heavy-handed visual imagery throughout that I found to be very distracting. For example, in the very beginning, Jor-El is known to make us dance against genetic engineering for a Kryptonian in favor of natural birding to hammer these ideology home. Jor-El flies on the back of winged beast while the rest of Kryptona is shown to use normal spaceships or hovercraft. The Lois Lane and Superman romance feels incredible and unnatural forced in there because they have to be a couple. They barely speaks to each other, and when they do it almost to entirely blood related very white what is the seemingly useless in these movie serving no purpose after look is scared and destructions Metropolis, which is based off our character. It's not all bad, there is a lot of the script gets right, the important moments area handled well, they are made to feel important, or the flashbacks which area numerous in Kenna's are touching, really well done in Kenna touching and really well done. It's these moments that really start to delve into the whole clock and is our person which I wish we had more of. Most too importantly especially near the end was able to really capture that Superman is such essence, that feeling of grandeur and Olympian my dad belongs in a story about a man of tomorrow. Snyder is the top of the game with Man of Steel. Action is crisp and fast, a departure from the unusual slow motion that has become Snyder's trademark. It also feels so powerful that Kryptonians really feel so like Super begins from another planet during it. Visualize all of the Kryptonian power set to keep the 5 scenes varied and exciting and made it all look real too, like these godlike here beings could actually exist. They're in a conjunction with the special effects made for some of actors and actresses in this movie really worked for me. Michael's Shannon played up much more despite Zed and especially a different take on the character that really worked for me. Henry Cavill is an overall somewhat resolved Superman, that's all the big emotional moments when they come here. Adams does an appropriately spunky learner the direction the comics have pushed for her characters in her for the past decade or so. I am glad J-movies are copied. Risco was a fan reinvention so far. Jor-El is more of an action hero for me. John Lan and Kevin Costner stole the show as the overlooking kids. They were both the perfect blend of acting like real parent who were lost in their trying to raise a super beings while at the same time knowing exactly what they needed to do. The movie is definitely worth seeing. There are a few story problems that might be more problematic for some viewers than others, but the visual and action make it worth the price of admission. It will not redefine your expectations for a superhero movie in any narrative sim, but it's made just in world of visual kind. Most importantly, it captures our feeling of what it would be like to inhabit a world with Superman, and that is more than enough for me. The title Man of Steel tells you what you are in for, a radical break from the past. The absence of the word Superman leads us to accept top to bottom reimagining, and that's what the film deliver for better and worse. This is our 2013 version of the story, dark, unrelated, and violent, chock full 9:1 style images of collapsing skyscrapers and dusted disaster survivors. A sincere but not a particularly funny or sweet. The hero is a glum hunk defending our planet so secure of our planet conspiracy that it assume anyone who presents himself as a good guy must have ulterior motives. So is what you need to behave in your spinner if you are going to be a super in this world. Superman brings the character in line with the modern era. presenting a hero who is still willing to defend a world that does not always understand or appreciate his sacrifices. This time, the iconic blue and yellow suit has been replaced with a more muted, synthetic-looking design. The traditional costume has been reimagined as advanced battle armor rather than a simple uniform, and Superman finally wears his famous red trunks underneath instead of over his suit. Overall, this is a strong example of early 21st century Hollywood fantasy filmmaking. It carries the unmistakable feeling of a modern summer blockbuster, featuring energetic handheld camera work, a darker color palette, massive action sequences, impressive visual effects, and elaborate production design. The film draws inspiration from science fiction classics, alien worlds, and the storytelling traditions of filmmakers like Ridley Scott and Steven Spielberg. It also builds a detailed mythology that feels ready to expand into a larger, interconnected universe similar to the Marvel model. While the moments of humor are enjoyable, they sometimes feel out of place and create slight tonal shifts. The movie also breaks away from previous Superman films in the way it tells its story. The screenplay, credited to David S. Goyer, begins with a dramatic prologue set on Krypton. The sequence introduces a futuristic world filled with advanced technology, including space-traveling structures, massive spacecraft, and genetically engineered warriors. Superman's parents, Jor-El and Lara, are caught in a conflict involving the destruction of their planet. Jor-El fights to convince Krypton's leaders that their reckless exploitation of the environment is causing the planet's collapse, while also facing a rebellion led by General Zod. Zod's anger comes from Jor-El's decision to break Krypton's strict biological traditions by naturally conceiving a child rather than creating one through their controlled breeding system. Zod and his followers are eventually banished from Krypton in spacecraft that feature a unique, almost alien-inspired design. The film's visual style embraces a more futuristic and mechanical approach to science fiction, with Krypton presented as a world unlike anything previously seen in Superman adaptations. After Krypton's destruction, Kal-El escapes to Earth, where he is raised by the Kents and eventually becomes Superman. Henry Cavill's portrayal of Superman is impressive. He is charismatic, physically convincing, and naturally fits the role, but his performance avoids traditional superhero confidence. Instead, this version of Clark Kent feels like a person searching for his identity. Unlike earlier portrayals, where Superman's secret life was revealed through straightforward storytelling, this film explores his development through flashbacks filled with emotional memories and personal struggles. The past and present unfold together, reflecting the character's constant battle with the weight of his history, his lost homeworld, and the responsibility that comes with his extraordinary abilities. Some of the most effective moments focus on young Clark Kent trying to understand powers he cannot control. He fears that revealing his abilities will make people see him as a threat. One early scene shows Clark overwhelmed during a school lesson because his enhanced senses allow him to experience the world in an unbearable way. He sees through people's bodies, noticing their bones, veins, and organs beneath their skin. At the same time, he hears countless voices around him, creating a confusing and overwhelming noise that he cannot escape. These scenes carry a feeling similar to The Incredibles, exploring the struggle of hiding extraordinary abilities in order to fit into ordinary life. Jonathan Kent's concerns about Clark revealing his powers add emotional depth, showing the difficult choices involved in protecting him. In these moments, Henry Cavill delivers a restrained and powerful performance, bringing a quiet vulnerability to Superman. He carries the presence of a classic movie star while portraying a hero who is compassionate, lonely, and shaped by the hardships of life. This version of Superman is not simply an unstoppable icon. He is a man searching for purpose while carrying the burden of being something greater than human.